Good morning, I'm Gretchen Hall. It is a Friday, the 30th day of May, bringing you Morning Matters because your mornings matter. Let's get to the stories that matter today. The Senate moves the impeachment articles presentation against Vice President Sara Duterte to June 11, delaying the original June 2 date. President Bongbong Marcos continues his administrative shakeup, removing officials with ties with the Duterte administration while retaining those involved in former President Rodrigo Duterte's arrest. CIDG Chief Nicolas Torre III's appointment as PNP chief marks the biggest change yet. Former Congressman Arnie Teves returns to the Philippines following his deportation from Timor-Leste. And President Bongbong Marcos says it is now time for Teves to face justice. Welcome to our program, Morning Matters, where we talk about the issues you need to know for the rest of your day. Now, first on the agenda, the Senate has postponed the presentation of the articles of impeachment against Vice President Sara Duterte, moving the date from June 2 to June 11. The delay was attributed to the Senate's need to focus on passing key pieces of legislation and confirming more than 200 presidential appointees before the 90th Congress adjourns. In response, the House of Representatives has relayed Escudero's notice to its prosecution panel. Now, despite the rescheduling, the Senate remains on track to convene as an impeachment court by late July. Arnolfo Teves has arrived in the Philippines 2 years after he was tagged as the mastermind in the killing of Governor Roel Digamo. Here's the full story.
Former Congressman Arnie Teves is now back in the Philippines after being deported from Timor-Leste. NBI Director Jaime Santiago, Justice Assistant Secretary Eliseo Cruz, and immigration officials were at Timor-Leste to facilitate the transfer of custody to the Philippines. Teves was in handcuffs and his feet were chained as he boarded the Philippine Air Force plane. The aircraft first stopped over at Davao for refueling, then headed to Manila before midnight on Thursday. The Timorese government earlier explained that they had Teves deported because his continued stay in their country as fugitive poses an internal security threat. They added that it is disrupting their bilateral relations with the Philippines, especially now that they have a responsibility to the region. This is in anticipation of Timor-Leste's ascension as ASEAN member in October. Despite this, DOJ assures due process will be accorded to Teves.
We assured the executive of Timor-Leste that we will do things as in observing all the tenets of due process and fair play. Unlike the victims who died here, there was no fair play when 13 people were murdered. Pinatay po yung 13 tao rito, kaya hindi ho ito basta-basta pinag-uusapan at hindi ho ito ginagawang kampihan. Ang mahalaga po, yung mga pamilya na nawalan po ng mga mahal sa buhay, magkaroon ng hustisya.
Meanwhile, Teves' camp insists his deportation is illegal, as they still have a petition for writ of habeas corpus. Their next course of action would be to prepare for the former congressman's trial in connection with the murder of Negros Oriental Governor Roel Digamo and 9 others in 2023.
Isang malaking kamote ang nangyari. Nag-issue po ng order ang Tribunal de Recursos ng Timor-Leste na sinasabing within 48 hours ay i-produce, iharap sa hukuman si Congressman Teves upang magpaliwanag ang mga authorities ng Timor-Leste, mga executive authorities, kung bakit siya ay inaresto. Ngunit ito ay magiging moot and academic. Ngayon pong siya ay ilalabas na ng Timor-Leste at ibabalik na po sa Pilipinas.
President Bongbong Marcos, for his part, thanked the President and Prime Minister of Timor-Leste.
As we know, the former Congressman Arnie Teves is facing charges of murder and other crimes related to the ambush killing of the former Governor Digamo. We would like also to assure all our citizens that such lawlessness will not go unpunished, and it is now time for Arnie Teves to face justice.
Several motorcycle riders have been spotted hiding their license plates to avoid detection by the NCAP cameras. Photos circulating online have shown plates covered with tape and stickers. Some riders have even used face masks to obscure their plates.
Meron na po akong utos sa ating nagbabantay sa CCTV na pag may na-flag po sila na nakita na tinakpan po yung plaka, aabangan po ng enforcers natin yan at uhulihin po.
The MMDA warned that covering or tampering with license plates is illegal and subject to penalties. Those caught doing so will face a fine of 5,000 pesos.
Palabas na kami ng memo sa lahat ng aming field personnel because violation po yan ng traffic code at ang multa po niyan is 5,000. Baka po hindi alam ng ating mga kababayan na ang multa po niyan ay mahal. Marami kaming na-monitor sa CCTV na nilagyan ng electrical tape, nilagyan ng masking tape. So we admire the Filipino ingenuity. Pero I am warning them na ang penalty for this is 5,000. Baka po magulat sila. So pinakalat na ho namin yan.
And to talk about the no-contact apprehension policy, we have one rider, Party List Representative Rog Gutierrez, to tell us more about this resolution that he filed in the House. Welcome back to Morning Matters.
Hi, I'm Gretchen. Good morning, and to all our viewers, good morning. Hopefully, this time around, there won't be any technical difficulties. I apologize for yesterday.
Okay na. Medyo malinaw-linaw na tayo.
Great,
Pero ang isa pang, actually, ang isang malabo ay itong pagtatakip ng mga plaka ng mga tao kasi akala nila hindi sila mapipenalize, ano. Pero, 5 days into the no-contact apprehension policy, the MMDA has said that it has significantly brought down the number of infractions from, I believe, 3,982 naging 1,112. That is, of course, in EDSA. And what have your observations been for the past week?
Well, I can only speak for how the constituency feels po, no? And while the MTA would stand firm on their belief that the NCAP is, a valid way of enforcement, and they would always they would always turn to the numbers. Actually, what changed since the filing was actually I was also invited by the MMDA to participate in a few consultative hearings, although not necessarily on NCAP, but other matters regarding EDSA rehab. Of course, we talked about the NCAP, and they would always mention nga po na based on their observation, based on the number of violations, bumaba po sila, based on the anecdotal observations, mas maganda po yung estado on the road. But as a counter to that, what we have heard is that, okay, it's more of a fear thing. It's more of that fear of being watched. It's not so much as inherently discipline has improved, but out of fear, it's the exact opposite now on the spectrum. Like we mentioned before, and we've always mentioned, our position in 2022 remains the same in 2024. Yung layunin po maganda po. Yung objective maganda. If this were to be implemented perfectly, it would be good because definitely violators should be apprehended. Violators should be made to answer for yung paglalabag po nila. But at the state of things, when the implementation is imperfect, when there are questions of due process, I think that's where we would have to put our foot down. So when they say po na the violators went down, I think it's more of they're overly careful, overly cautious. What they noticed was traffic has increased because everyone's scared of crossing even lane markings where normally they would be allowed to pass through po, no? And the normal practices usually, which motorists have been used to, they're being very, very cautious now by fear of being apprehended. Not because they might violate, but because of the fear that they would be, not because, like when they know it's like, it's an open lane, broken lane, for example, you're allowed to cross it. But sometimes dahil, for example, like I mentioned, pag unclear yung markings, pag blurred na po siya, hindi sila sure kung solid marking or blurred marking. So, to err on the side of caution, doon na lang sila. But because no one would like to move, it causes more traffic. So, parang these are the things that are the effects of having like infrastructure not being ready. So, I think that's what they're feeling on the ground. And more importantly, I think while they would always laud as achievements yung lower violations ng penalty, the trust of it really brings out to the fore the question of trust that our citizens and motorists have at the MMDA. at least for our constituencies, ang palagi namin naririnig, we've held a few consultation meetings already, and it's always that they don't trust that the way that it's being implemented. Their biggest fear is that while they may be following it to the T, some things, for example, that would be considered accepting circumstances, and I think it's been in the news now too, when you're talking, for example, about giving way for emergency vehicles, exemptions that you would think, like for example, if you have to get around potholes, or when enforcers are telling you that you can cross on a red light, things that in a normal basis, okay, this would be an exception, you could do it because sila na po mismo nagsasabi sa inyo. But because of NCAP, they're afraid, they're scared. They would rather err on the side of caution. Ayaw po nila na sa overly strict AI enforced NCAP, baka mahuli po sila because it seems to be the at the end of the day, the line of the ending line of the MDA is that mag-contest na lang po kayo. They've been harping that they would be having an easier way to contest. It will now be online, but we have to understand that this puts undue burden on the motorists. No, they will be the one who are burdened, and they are the ones with the burden of proof to prove that hindi po sila naglabag. Of course, this comes with a lot of other problems, Ma'am Gretchen. No, but I'm just trying to focus on what you said. Doon po sa number of violations, and I think that's what is relevant to that po.
Tama ka, no? There's a lot of things to be worried about when it comes to this. But one thing that I noticed, it seems to have been done in haste as a way of preparing for the EDSA rehabilitation. Unang-una, wala pang yung app na they were saying kung saan makikita mo yung violations mo and where you can contest it. They say that they will launch it soon. Pangalawa, meron pang fake news na website, no? Fake link that they're telling people not to click, and it's causing a lot of confusion at this point. What do you think? What is your resolution calling for in view of the upcoming heavy traffic along EDSA? Is it a pause that you're trying to have? A suspension?
Well, Ma'am Gretchen, it's very understandable. It's very plain to see po, no, that this implementation of NCAP was I don't know if it's a reaction, but it coincides definitely with the EDSA rehabilitation. It's very clear. Even the Supreme Court granted a partial lifting of the TRO only for the MMDA. They didn't lift it for the LGUs involved. They lifted it only for the MMDA, and they outright mentioned that it was because of the EDSA rehabilitation. But with that said, I can't help but feel na parang ironic po siya, no? Na like you mentioned, it's being rushed, but the TRO has been going on for 2 years, and that's why I filed the resolution. Because when we had, prior to this, the status quo in sa House, prior to the TRO, we were already going to have a hearing po, no? There were a few privileged speeches, there were a few resolutions filed. If you remember, there was an uproar in 2022. At magkakaroon na po sana talaga ng investigasyon sa Kamara. Ngunit yung nangyari po is dahil TRO po yung Supreme Court, out of respect to a co-equal branch of government, the House opted not to push through. So what my resolution seeks to do is that when they lifted the TRO, it seems to be wala, from what we feel, hindi pa po developed naman in the 2 years. That's why I'm saying it's ironic. As soon as the TRO was lifted, there was haste to implement, but we didn't feel the haste in correcting the issues that were existing for the 2 years of the TRO. So that's precisely why I filed the resolution. So if the TRO is lifted for them, the TRO is lifted for us, so we can continue our investigation to see how prepared really is this NCAP. It's like what I've always mentioned, what I've heard, what I've read, I'm just echoing the sentiment, is that it's a laudable policy. It's a first world policy, but we being forced on third world infrastructure. So that's what we want to really sift through with our investigation. Now that just it goes back on it was really quick. The moment that the TRO was lifted, they just gave it a week or so to and now they're implementing already after just a week. So but we've never heard news of the corrections that were being made. Again, for the past 2 years of the TRO, what the MMDA has mentioned, and they've admitted this openly now po, no, that they continue to monitor violations. That's how they're able to say na last May, 3,000 last year, but this time it's only 1,000. So that's what they're claiming now as achievements for the NCAP. And we understand that, we respect that. But what have we done for the infrastructure? What have we done for the lane markings? What have we done for the underlying systems that would be relied upon to, afford due process to our riders and motorists? That's why prior to filing my resolution, to be fair with them, I had a meeting with LTO ASEC Mendoza. And I wanted to ask him, where do we stand in? For example, isang issue po si Ma'am Gretchen is yung transfer of ownership. There's a lot of fears na because it's become an open habit, an open custom, not really, open practice, sorry, there we go. An open practice sa atin po na meron mga open deed of sale or may mga word of honor deals na lang na kaliwaan. Straight up, they swap cash for bikes that's second hand, third hand, so they don't register it anymore. Which, to be fair, under our laws, we're supposed to register them, but the LTO hasn't actually given the system hasn't been that smooth, no? That so much so that it's become a common practice. Now, how do we rectify years of that, let's say, erroneous practice po, no? When you have NCAP, it brings it all to the fore. Yung years yun na hindi po na-register properly, yung question po na if the summons are delivered to a previous owner and no longer the current owner. Where's the due process there? And more importantly, the delays po, no? If we recall, when we look at NCAP, although there are various implementations around the world, what we're aware of usually is that pag may violation po kayo, within 24 hours you'd be informed. Or at the very least, within a week. Ito po, the current status, according to the MNBA and with the LTO, what they told me, as far as I know, is that when the violation is found, it will be snail mailed within 7 days. So what they're saying is, within 7 days, they will manually verify, pass it to the LTO. LTO will provide the details, pass it back to MMDA, and then only then the MMDA will deliver it. But because summons are only valid by snail mail, according to them, but as I understand, we have Electronic Commerce Act on that online email would be valid, but they were saying snail mail po talaga. And that could take anywhere from 3 months. And our experience from last time, in 2022, sometimes a year. And it brings another issue, Ma'am Gretchen, no? Because the difference with manual and NCAP, manual apprehension and NCAP, pag manual po, when you're caught, you know what you've done wrong. You can rectify, you can correct your practice. Pero pag NCAP po, it could be 1 year you've been doing the same route. For example, you've been going to work, you've always been taking this right turn here. Only to find out 2 months in, binago ng...
Hindi pala pwede, oo.
Hindi na pala pwede, di mo alam, everyone's doing kasi alam nila. So for the next 10 months, patong lang po yung penalties. And then by the time that it arrives to you, it's too late because it arrives to you and then every day after, may darating pa. Or who knows if they even bundle the violations. So these are some of the issues that we fear and these are some of the issues that are eroding the trust po, no, in the agency. And that's why I feel...
It seems to be... Go ahead.
Sorry if I'm rambling, but I feel like in to be fair with the MDA, this hearing is really to afford them the opportunity to regain some of that trust, to at least inform them. Because during our meeting, to be fair with them, they are making positive developments. But like we said, bakit ngayon pa lang po? They told us some of our concerns. They said, "Oh, we have a solution coming." But why isn't it here? Shouldn't it be here first before we implement? And to think that this isn't a dry run po, no? They're actually implementing NCAP in full. So, yun po.
It seems to be heavy on the front end and weak on the back end. And a lot of confusion. Tama ka dun sa sinabi mo na kahit yung mga road signs natin ay maraming hindi nakikita, hindi napapansin before this was even implemented. But so you're saying that the Supreme Court decision to lift the TRO was premature?
Oh no, I'm absolutely not saying that. I would never question the decision of a co-equal branch. But what I am saying po is that only the MMDA was granted the TRO. I mentioned that in relation to the EDSA rehab. So they were granted the TRO in relation to the EDSA rehab. So supposedly it was like a rushed re-implementation on their part, MMDA. But of course, the TRO, because wouldn't consider the preparedness. All they're concerned is the legal right of the agency to pursue its mandate. Yun lang naman po yun.
But it does open the investigation in the House. Speaking of, you represent the riders out there. I want to know your thoughts on what's happening in Commonwealth Avenue, the motorcycle lane there. May nagva-viral yung images na dikit-dikit ito mga motor na ito. Tapos meron din post akong nabasa saying that this is even more dangerous because they're like bowling pins na magkakatabi-katabi, and in effect, you're removing the advantage of motorcycles to weave through traffic. As a rider, do you agree with the motorcycle lane, or do you agree with the previous setup? Is that a safer alternative?
Actually, Ma'am Gretchen, I think it would have been a hybrid. I understand where the MMDA is coming from. In fact, we were consulted for this in 2022 when they were discussing about the Commonwealth. But the agreement back then was this was to be a pilot study, to really study if it, if it would be
Yes.
feasible. The reasoning for them, and the reason that we were thinking, okay, it might be okay to try it in Commonwealth, is that Commonwealth is 6 lanes. Some places have 4 lanes. Maluwag po siya. Commonwealth is one of those places na traffic is only during rush hour. Sa sobrang luwag po niya. And you have factors that there are measures that you can take to remedy it, like zipper lanes and whatnot. So that's why Commonwealth would have been the perfect pilot study. But lo and behold, during 2022, after a week, they decided to push through. And that's their prerogative as the executive. But our stand so far, in Commonwealth, it's exacerbated now because of NCAP. But it's really difficult. Commonwealth isn't so much as the final example of this. If you see it and you're already concerned, yung viral na parang problema yan. The safety concern, yes, it's there if they're all struck like bowling pins. On the other hand, yung sabi naman ng MMDA, this is better than the previous practice po, no, when all the lanes were shared. It's that because Commonwealth is so wide and cars are going fast, although there may 60, it can't be helped that some would go fast. An accident would sometimes be fatal kasi then they would be run over kasi they're dikit-dikit and there are a lot of
Yes.
other lanes that they're passing. That was the contention of the MDA. But now, with the dikit-dikit, it wasn't so bad before NCAP because nga po, they were afforded that leeway. They need that. We need that flexibility as two-wheel riders. We have to understand po, no? It's not like a car. A lot of people have that misconception. You press the pedal, you go. You press the brake, you stop. Sa motor po, it's a balancing act of gravitational forces po talaga. Like, you really have to be careful. You can't just brake hard. You have to do it smooth. You can't have your steering handlebars at an angle because it would cause you to slip. And that's why sometimes instead of, a lot of people ask, why didn't you just stop? You'd see them sometimes they would just avoid the pothole. Because you can't just stop normally. So in emergency situations, it actually makes it very dangerous. And we could see, nung viral post that you were showing us po, no, it is very dangerous pag ganyan na kumpul-kumpul. But that usually doesn't happen because that's only pag rush hour daw, and then pag rush hour, nakaka-filter pa rin. But like I mentioned, exacerbated by NCAP, that fear na hindi na pwede, you can't go out of the lane for any reason whatsoever, including yung avoiding potholes, avoiding spot, or trying to overtake. Although generally they should be allowed to overtake daw, if I remember right. They aren't limited exclusively. If they're overtaking, they can naman. That really makes it a problem. And this makes it more of a problem when there was that proposition that an MC lane be implemented in EDSA. And that where I feel na even a pilot study would be not feasible because that's even tighter. That's a place na kahit hindi rush hour traffic, and that would really be a problem. It really limits their flexibility. It puts them in danger. Again, we have to understand ang two wheels po, vulnerable po yan. Pag may banggaan, pag ang may kasalanan yung two wheels, siya yung kawawa. Pag may kasalanan four wheels, yung two wheels pa rin po yung kawawa. They're the ones at most, they're the most vulnerable. They're exposed physically. They're under the heat and the sun. They're the most prone to be distracted. So I think there should be some sort of preferential treatment, and locking them into a motorcycle lane, that's something we still have to talk about po, no? Because as it stands, even the implementation Commonwealth, which was supposed to be a pilot study and now it's being implemented, it suffers the same problems. Blurred lines, some are broken.
Yes.
If you notice, I don't know if you take the Commonwealth route po,
I
Ma'am
do,
Gretchen,
yes.
no? But when you do, so when you're going northbound and then Standang Sora, suddenly it's gonna swerve 2 lanes to the left.
Yes.
If you aren't careful, if you don't notice the lane, it could be going straight. In fact, allegedly, That was a place na usually nakaabang lang yung mga enforcer kasi manguhuli sila.
Tapos
These are the
manghuhuli.
things,
Oo.
yes, nakatago lang po doon under the underbridge, the underpass. So dito po, this is what we're saying na it really erodes the trust in our implementing
Well,
agencies.
Congressman, are you also planning to look into the odd even scheme proposal by the MMDA? Because that's also causing a lot of confusion. For one, sa EDSA lang daw. And the number coding applies outside of EDSA. So kapag krinis-cross mo yung mga numero, parang ilang araw ka lang makakabiyahe talaga. Is that something that you're also planning to contest or investigate?
Well, Ma'am Gretchen, it's a cause for concern, definitely. Although not in the same breath of the NCAP. Sa NCAP po, nag-file po kami ng resolution seeking inquiry po. No? That's a different thing. That's investigation in Congress. For EDSA, odd even, including motorcycle lane, and EDSA rehabilitation in general, we filed a letter lang po with the MMDA. But we do have our concerns. Number one po, just to go back po na the motorcycle lane in relation to the EDSA rehab, they promised, although they're still ironing out the kinks and we're working on workarounds, but they promised that it would be temporary because this is only for the purpose of EDSA rehabilitation, would be at most 2 years by their estimate. But we've heard that before po, no? Sabi nila yung
Matagal po
subway
yun.
by 2026.
Matagal yun, yung 2 taon. Medyo
Yeah, those 2 years are long enough.
life-changing yun. Oo.
Opo.
Especially for those who cannot afford to go to their work. Hindi, kumbaga parang financial wise, no, it really hurts the pocket to be able to suffer. For example, if you have one car and you're only allowed to ply the roads for 3 times a week, at yun lang yung daan mo. Although may alternate routes naman daw, pero syempre, it also eats up on time and stress and everything else, health.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Ma'am Gretchen po. No? So it really becomes problematic. Those 2 years will be long, hard years, and we're not sure if it will be 2 years only because, like, for example, some other flagship infrastructure projects, sabi nila, yung subway 2026 tapos na hanggang ngayon, it's delayed to 28 or 29, I forgot. So the same thing with EDSA MC lane, and the same thing with the odd even. So that would be applied for 2 years. Our concern naman po with odd evens, again, like NCAP, how strict will they be? EDSA is not your normal freeway. It's not the usual. It's not an expressway when you think about it. Although it seems to be, it has turned into the heart of Metro Manila. There are establishments to the side. You have intersections everywhere. People cross these intersections every day. I mean, yung motorists po, no? So how strict are they? Are they allowed to cross intersections? And to be fair, MDA said that they will be. But how strict will they be? No, when you're crossing the EDSA, would that be considered a violation of the odd even? And another question with odd even, which actually applies also to the color coding, is that this seems to be unduly burdensome to the less fortunate, not really less fortunate, pero it wouldn't affect the upper social classes. It wouldn't
Kasi bibili lang ng
affect the
bagong
upper.
sasakyan. Oo.
Di naman sa bibili, Ma'am Gretchen, nandyan na yan eh. Marami na po silang sasakyan eh. So it wouldn't affect them. You do this, they're gonna like, okay, lease the other car. Pero like you said, those that only have one car that we have to ply that route every day, sila po yung affected talaga. So when number coding affects you, it takes out one travel option out of 5 days. Odd even would take out 50% off the bat, plus your number coding pa. Although remains to be seen. These are the apprehensions. But with all of that said, Ma'am Gretchen, we have to understand rin po. I think this is a call also for cooperation with the MMDA. When we had our meeting yesterday or the other day, they really explained that they have no choice. EDSA is dying po, no? They really do need this rehabilitation. The reason why, sanay na po tayo na every weekend may asphalting, may reblocking ang EDSA. But then we wouldn't be surprised a month after or as soon as a little rain hits, sira ulit. It appears to be that EDSA is dying. It isn't an asphalt problem anymore. It's the underlying the concrete. It's the underlying structure that they have to fix, and that's why they really have to take this massive rehabilitation. This isn't your usual asphalt thing. The last rehabilitation that they said, the last rehabilitation of this scale was done in the 80s. So it's really high time. So with that, they're asking us for our cooperation. To be fair, these are the things that they see that could ease traffic
Well,
for EDSA.
Congressman,
but-
I think
yes.
that needs to be communicated better because on our side, we think this is just repaving. The MMDA has not said that there are structural problems to the whole of EDSA. If you put it that way, then it becomes a lot more understandable and hindi siya magmumukhang beautification in time for the ASEAN. So I hope there could be also more communication efforts down that way, pagpapaliwanag para din sa publiko na maghihirap ng 2 taon na para dito. Good luck with your investigation in the House. We hope the EDSA rehab will also be looked into, so that will come out and for the general public to know. Thank you so much for your time today. Clear signals. On a Friday, we have one writer, Party List Representative Rog Gutierrez.
Thank you, ma'am. Morning po, everyone.
Don't go away. We'll be back with more stories right after the break. Good morning, I'm Gretchen Ho, and here on Morning Matters, we talk about the most pressing issues and give you the context behind the headlines. President Bongbong Marcos has retained key officials who were instrumental in the arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte. Julie Baiza has the details.
Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin once again made the announcement of the latest cut from the cabinet revamp under the Marcos administration. First to go in the second wave of reset, Solicitor General Menardo Guevara. He was replaced by Darlene Berberabe, who took her oath today before President Marcos. Berberabe is the Dean of the UP College of Law. Before this, she was Chief Executive Officer of Pag-ibig Fund under the administration of the late Noynoy Aquino.
Si Soljan Guevara has been there since the beginning, no? And maybe it is time for him to go to another venture. And so the President accepted his resignation to allow for fresh blood to come in.
Bersamin clarified that Guevara's departure from the Marcos cabinet had nothing to do with his recusal from cases challenging the arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte by the International Criminal Court.
The President respected his ethical decision to recuse. Now, if there was a reservation about his professionalism at that time, the President could have already removed him. But the President continued to repose trust in him.
Another big announcement on Thursday, new PNP Chief, Major General Nicolas Torre. The CIDG chief who was a frontliner in the arrest of Kingdom of Jesus Christ founder Apollo Kibuloy and former President Digong. Marcos's executive secretary cannot say if Torres' assent to the PNP was because of these events.
Wala akong may bigay na detalye dyan, ano? You know, the appointment of elements of the officers of the PNP, there has to be kept confidential. Okay? We should respect that confidentiality.
Meantime, President Marcos has also accepted the resignation of Commission on Higher Education Chair Prospero de Vera. He will be replaced by CHED Commissioner Dr. Shirley Agrupis, previous president of the Mariano Marcos State University in Ilocos Norte. Bersamin did not offer any explanation about de Vera's departure from the cabinet, only noting that he had already served in CHED for 2 terms. The ES was also pressed for answers on the fate of other cabinet executives. Bersamin confirmed that the president did not accept the courtesy resignations of Justice Secretary Boying and Interior Secretary John Vic Remulla, as well as Defense Secretary Gibo Teodoro.
Some officials responded to the cabinet reshuffle following President Bongbong Marcos's call for courtesy resignations. Former Solicitor General Minardo Guevara said he respects and fully understands President Marcos's decision to accept his courtesy resignation. He also praised Berberabe as an excellent choice to replace him as Solicitor General. House Speaker Martin Romualdez expressed support for Berberabe's appointment, citing her legal expertise, leadership, and integrity as key reasons why she is the right person to serve as the Republic's chief legal defender. Romualdez also praised the appointment of Police Major General Nicolas Torre III as the new PNP chief, describing him as a no-nonsense leader committed to restoring discipline and trust within the police force. Interior and Local Government Secretary John Vic Remulla likewise welcomed Torres' appointment, saying it was based on the president's careful assessment of his strong credentials and exemplary service. Meanwhile, former presidential spokesperson Attorney Edwin Lacerda believes there has been no significant reshuffling in the cabinet so far.
Seems like there has been no major changes except for a few. And the second time around, this announcement today posts no viable reason other than the most likely connection between the Duterte, the previous government.
As you already know, President Marcos has decided to purge his cabinet. In the first wave of last week's cabinet revamp, more officials were retained than replaced. The entire economic cluster remained untouched, though. Only Environment Secretary Loizaga and Foreign Secretary Manalo were replaced. In the second round announced today, it was a similar case. Only 2 were removed: Solicitor General Minardo Guevara and CHED Chairman Popoy de Vera. Interior Secretary John Vic Remulla, Justice Secretary Boying Remulla, and Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro were all retained. However, key frontline agencies, those that deal directly with the public and deliver services, still have no final decisions. These include the Departments of Agriculture, Social Welfare, and Public Works. Let's break that down with a political pundit, resident political Papa Pundit, who joins us now here on Morning Matters. Thank you so much for waking up early for this show.
Good morning, Gretch.
Nahahawa na ako sa mga kasama ko dito eh.
At last, nakaabot.
Oo nga.
Last time na inimita mo ako, 5 minutes before the end, ang inabutan ko because of traffic.
So sa susunod, kung 6 o'clock kayo umalis ngayon, kapag nagkaroon na ng odd-even scheme, dapat 5:30 umalis na kayo.
Magmamotorsiklo na.
Okay, puntahan natin itong balasahan. Kahapon, taking a look at the common theme ng mga tinanggal niya. We have Popoy de Vera, we have Minardo Guevara, at saka we have, sino pa yung isa?
Si Loizaga. Sino po ba?
Oh yes, oo. It seems that it is a purging somehow of the Duterte allies. Would you agree?
Well, somehow. Usually kasi ang revamp, nangyayari at particular moments na may crisis yung gobyerno. Kaya long overdue na to eh. Halimbawa, nung nawasak yung unit team, dapat nagkaroon na ng major purging doon. Hindi lang ngayon. No? Ikalawa, nung meron siyang crisis during the controversial budget, dapat nagkaroon din siya ng purging noon. Dahil major yung pagbaba ng kanyang approval ratings.
Saan ang purging noon? Hindi ba sa House yun?
Well,
Hindi man eh.
well, sa lahat dapat. No? Sa lahat dapat. Dahil, halimbawa ngayon, hindi lang ito usapin ng fiasco during the midterm election na majority ng kanilang kandidato ay natalo. Although, i-dispute nila yon. No? Usapin din ito nung plunging approval ratings ni President Bongbong na almost na sa level ni Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo during her term na one of the lowest, if not the lowest in modern history. So ngayon kasi ay bumababa yung kanyang approval ratings, tumataas yung kanyang mga kalaban, no? Tapos yung problema ng bansa lumalala, halimbawa yung self-rated poverty record high. Yung involuntary hunger, starvation ay 28%. Yung crisis education, 91% learning poverty, etc. etc. So, maraming nangyayari. Usually, pag ganyang klaseng crisis, ay nangyayari yung cabinet revamp para magkaroon ng reset. Para aminin mo na may problema, pero you're going to change it. You're going to reform it. No? Hindi lang kasi siya usapin ng form like messaging at saka narrative. Bagamat napakahalaga nun. At mukhang may crisis din sila ron eh. Kaya siguro nagpalit sila 3-4 times ng communications chief. No? At hindi ako magugulat kung magpapalit sila uli. Pero yung substance ay mahalaga rin eh. At yung substance ay hindi lang yung reform agenda na pinagbabatayan ng kanyang dalawang SONA, kung hindi pati yung cabinet revamp. Pero sabi nga ni Edwin Lacerda ay medyo kulang itong cabinet revamp na ito. Dahil sana isang buhos na lang. Lahat ng mga gusto mong tanggalin at i-absorb yung blame ay gagawin mo. At hindi mo siya ililipat lang sa iba't ibang posisyon. Yung una kasing first batch ay 3 doon sa 5 na natanggal.
Parang binigyan din ng posisyon sa iba.
Yes. Kaya hindi ko maunawaan.
Si
For
Jerry
example,
Acuzar nilagay sa
Pasig
Rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation. Tapos si Secretary Manalo sa United Nations at si DOE Secretary na isang dahilan kung ba't tinanggal ay hindi niya napababa yung presyo ng kuryente ay inilipat sa environment. Hindi ko rin makita yung logic na yun. So, ganun yun. At least itong second batch na mga former Duterte appointees din, no? Sa CHED at saka sa Solicitor General position, ay hindi na nilipat. Hindi na nilipat. Siguro nakuha na niya yung message. Pero mukhang may susunod pa na third batch. So parang siya, by increments nawawala yung impact sana ng isang buhos. No? Na willing ako ng restart. No? Ngayon ay parang bitin.
The firm resolve is cannot parang be seen.
Yes. Tapos ngayon,
dahil wishy-washy na naman.
Yes. Tapos parallel pa dyan, may mga statement siya like reconciliation, like ayaw niya ng impeachment. So, may mga confusing messages kasabay nitong revamp. Sana ito na lang focus mo. No?
Secretary, going into the midterms, what do you think is the most stark achievement of the president? I mean, isn't it also the arrest of the former president in The Hague at pati itong impeachment, which also the progressives kind of pushed for?
Yes, very defining yung dalawa na yun
Oo.
Mga 250 to 260 ang nag-file pumirma sa impeachment, including the presidential son. No? Tapos yung arrest, the first Asian to be charged sa International Criminal Court na directly or indirectly.
Mali ba yun? I mean,
tingin ko
kahit
tama.
yung progressives gusto nila yun, pero at the same time, it begs the question, hindi ba naiintindihan? Or hindi ba sang-ayon ang mayorya ng Pilipino?
Well, yung mayorya kasi, nasi-shape yan, depende sa messaging at saka narrative. Imagine mo, si Digong pa ngayon ang biktima ng human rights. Imagine mo, si Digong pa ngayon ang binayolate ang rule of law. No? Messaging yan Ibig sabihin, dapat ang ginawa ng gobyerno, ang pinroject nila, yung biktima ng tokhang. Yung mga families, yung mga kapatid, yung mga magulang, yung mga anak, no? Yun dapat ang pinroject nila. Kinapo sila ron Impeachment. Dapat in-emphasize nila bakit nag-i-impeachment. No? Nakalimutan yung impeachment complaints. So that's basically messaging. hindi na na-weaponize. Halimbawa, nung campaign, banat ang presidente ng betrayal ng national sovereignty. Pero walang nag-e-echo sa kanyang mga kandidato. Siya lang, mag-isa lang siya. Di ba? Binabanatan niya yung crimes against humanity during the campaign, pero mag-isa lang siya. Binabanatan niya yung mismanagement ng COVID pandemic, pero mag-isa lang siya. Binabanatan niya yung massive corruption like Parmali, pero mag-isa lang siya. So, hindi na-weaponize against their political rivals, political enemies. Nandun yung problema, hindi yung dahil nangyari.
Nandun yung opportunity.
Yes.
Hindi nagamit.
Yes.
So
parang naging defensive pa sila.
They're losing the propaganda war.
Yes. Pero kailangan din ng substance. Halimbawa, yung reform agenda, yung sabi niya nung dalawang SONA, nadudurugin ko ang mga kartel sa agriculture, huhulihin ko mga smugglers, mga hoarders.
Nasana.
Nasaan yun?
Oh.
Yung wage increase na more than almost 2 years na nasa Congress, no? Yung 200 peso. Ang sabi niya, hindi priority. Isa yun sa mga issues ng mga tao, sikmura no? So, mga ganun ba na kulang? So, kaya yun yung purpose ng revamp. Tumataas ang kuryente, sisihin mo yung Secretary of Energy. Tumataas ang pagkain, sisihin mo yung Secretary of Agriculture. May slow down yung economy from 7% to 6% to 5% growth target. Kailangan meron kang sisihin. Or else, lahat yan tatama sa'yo. Diba? Halimbawa ngayon, niretain niya yung buong economic team. Medyo tatamaan siya dyan. Diba? So, yun yung purpose ng impeachment. Kaya medyo nalilito ko, ano ba yung purpose nito? Paano, dapat may malinaw kang strategy tsaka vision para ito yung tatanggalin mo, ito yung papalit mo. Kahit magtanggal ka o magpalit.
At ito yung gusto kong mangyari sa susunod na 3 taon.
Yes. Kaya, halimbawa, gusto kong palitan si Soljan Guevara ng mas dedepensahan yung bansa, like Berberabe. So may logic, di ba? Galing sa academe, galing sa gobyerno,
galing sa pag-ibig.
May karanasan, di ba? So may ganun logic. Pero yung iba parang wala. No, halimbawa, DOE Secretary Lotila, lilipat mo sa DN. What was that for? No, yung ganun ba? So, yung revamp, as well as yung mga ipapalit mo, dapat should serve a vision. No? Ano ba yung political project mo as president? Yun yung kulang sa paliwanag. Kung meron. Assuming na meron.
The appointment of CIDG Chief Nicolas Torre as PNP Chief. He's the first graduate of the Philippine National Police Academy to become PNP Chief kasi madalas galing PMA.
Yes.
Oo.
Well, expected yon. Una ay paubos na yung mga galing ng PMA. No, sa Philippine National Police. Ikalawa ay nag-perform siya well dun sa gusto ng presidente. Like yung arrest ni Kibuloy, yung arrest ni Digong. No? Kaya
reward.
One of the few police officers na very popular at this point. So yun din yung kinuha nila, hinarness nila, yung popularity ni
Magagalit sa yung mga Duterte supporters.
Of course. Galit pa sila dati pa eh. Tapos yung loyalty. Mahalaga yung loyalty lalo na ngayon na may crisis.
So it's more of appointments made out of a loyalty check, mainly.
A combination of loyalty check, performance, at saka moving forward, what can be done or what should be done. Yun ang hinihintay ko na sinasabi ko nga kanina, what is the political project? Yung strategy mo will serve that political project. Yung tactics mo, like appointments, will serve that strategy. So, yun yung hinahanap ko na framework at this point. Baka malalim lang masyado, hindi ko maunawaan.
Baka marinig natin yan sa susunod na SONA, sa papalapit na SONA ng Pangulo.
Yes. Medyo defining dahil magkakaroon ka ng either ma-retain yung Speaker at saka Senate President o magbago.
Okay, speaking of, let's go to that leadership shake-up in the House and in the Senate.
Yes.
Is there a challenger for House Speaker Martin Romualdez?
Well, may mga lumalabas na,
Pulong?
na aspiring na like Pulong, pero walang chance yun.
Bakit wala?
Wala pa silang numbers at this point. No? Tapos, siyempre, nasa gilid, nag-a-ambition din si Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, no? Na very silent nowadays. No? At lumalabas din yung pangalan ni Toby Chanco, yung alyansa campaign manager. At openly, binabanatan niya si Speaker. Sinisisi niya dito sa fiasco ng midterm elections. Medyo revealing yan doon sa nangyayari. At lumalabas din yung pangalan ni Albi Benitez. Pero ang speakership kasi, hindi lang siya usapin
Iba yung dahilan kaya lumabas yung balita kahapon.
Anong balita
Just kidding,
yun?
just kidding. Okay.
Tapos, binabalanse mo yung political baggage, political value added ng Speaker at saka ng Senate President with sino ba yung kayang kontrolin yung Kongreso. Lalo na sinasabi ni Vice President Sara ay ipapa-impeach ko ang Presidente. So ang impeachment mag-emanate sa House. So sino yung makakakontrol sa House na hindi mangyayari yon? So binabalanse mo yung, yung power, yung to control the House and the Senate at saka yung political value added or political baggage. No?
Okay, let's go to the Senate. Mas mahigpit ang race dito. Dalawang pangalan ng umuusbong, Tito Soto and of course, Chis Escudero, the incumbent.
Yes.
How are you seeing that race? How will they get their numbers?
Tatlo ang mahalaga dyan eh. Una, siyempre, yung mahalaga, yung mga senators na ang sabi nga nila, separate republics. No? Gumagawa sila ng desisyon based sa kanilang political calculation, paano sila makikinabang dyan. So dapat, simple majority yan eh. No? Kung hindi mo makuha yung majority, ay hindi ka magiging Senate President. Ikalawa, yung tulong o yung support ng Malacanang. No? Dahil sabihin ng Malacanang, hindi, separate body yan. Legislative yan, kami executive. Pero in the real world, meron niya mga pressures kung sino ang gusto nila. Dahil yung priority bills nila, maiipit kung hindi friendly yung Senate President. At ikatlo, yung popular opinion. Halimbawa, kung merong levels ng corruption o may levels ng controversy yung mga taong involved, paano sila magiging Senate President? Na magiging bagahe sila dun sa mga dun sa mga senator, kung susuportahan
But how crucial is the Senate President to the upcoming impeachment trial? Kung sino ang mananalo?
Well, very crucial. Pero
ano ang role, ano maging papel niya? Kasi lahat naman tatayo bilang judge senator judge
Yes.
Pero ang Senate President, meron bang special role niyan?
Oo, katulad ng role ni Enrile during the impeachment of Corona. Siya yung parang nagpapacilitate eh. Siya yung parang convener eh. So, pwede niyang impluensyahan yung proseso to some extent. No? Pero dalawa yung labanan sa impeachment. Una, matutuloy ba? No? Dahil ang sinasabi ng iba ay dahil na late dahil doon sa forthwith na debate, no? Na sabi ni Senate President Chis Escudero, hindi yan ibig sabihin ay ngayon din or immediate. No? Hindi ko alam kung saan dictionary niya pinulot yung kanyang definition. Pero meron yung political value ng pag-delay. Dahil ngayon, yun ang magiging major issue. Pwede ba na yan ay ipasa sa 20th Congress from the 19th Congress kung hindi siya na-convene dito sa 19th
And who
Senate.
will settle that jurisdiction issue?
Well,
Kasi
the Senate...
pag sinabi natin Supreme Court, co-equal branch yan eh.
Yeah nga, the Senate itself will resolve that.
So they can stop the proceedings from happening themselves?
Tingin ko, medyo unprecedented yan. Baka pwedeng sabihin ng Senate na, tatanggapin namin ito galing sa 19th Congress. Or pwede rin nilang sabihin, teka, may legal frailty yan. Dahil nangyari yan noong 19th Congress.
Pero kung hindi na, if you take a look at the numbers in the Senate and Sara is poised to be acquitted, what would be the value of having to go through that chopping board kung ang ulo na nandun ay ulo ng presidente at hindi ng vice-presidente?
Well, yun ang purpose ng trial para makita yung ebidensya. Halimbawa, pag nagsimula yung impeachment, pwedeng pabuksan yung bank accounts ni Sara. Na sinasabi ni Trillanes, merong mga anomalous hundreds of millions galing sa mga drug lords, pogo lords, etc. Pag nabuksan yon at nakita na totoo yon, yung mga senador ba ay boboto dun sa isang akusado?
So popular public sentiment will also be against them.
Yes. Ikalawa, yung mga ebidensya. At saka ikatlo, going into 2028, saan ba yung political calculation ng mga senador? Lalo na may 3 years pa ang presidente. No? Pero si Sara ay medyo nasa top 2 ng mga presidential preferences going into 2028. So may mga iba't ibang calculation.
Sino yung top 1?
No? Well, ang naglalaban dyan si
Tulfo.
Sara at si Tulfo. Pero
Sinong Tulfo?
Si Rafi, no? Pero baka malay mo, baka may sumulpot pa. Na iba. Usually may sumusulpot na black swan Di ba?
Sino ba yan? Si Bam o si...
Who knows, no?
Risa.
Who knows, no? Sino yung mga susulpot dyan, no? So, yan ay magpa-factor in sa calculation ng mga senador.
Okay.
So, nung panahon ni Corona, bagamat apples and oranges, Chief Justice yun, ito sa Vice President, ay nagsimula rin with a minority. Wala rin numbers eh. Pero eventually, because of the evidence, because of the process, because of a lot of things, nagbabago.
Ang ihip ng hangin.
Kaya kahit sabihin mo na, uy, mahirap mag-convict. Pero depende yan sa maraming factors. Yung expose ng bank accounts.
Kung mapunta muna tayo doon in the first place at kung ma-communicate ng maayos na gano'n ang mangyayari dahil nga parang may kahinaan sa messaging. Coup rumors in the AFP, have you heard of any? Nakakapagtaka, no? Na si General Browner, sinasabi niya.
Lagi sumusunod.
Meron bang dissatisfaction among officers in the AFP?
Well, laging sumusulpot yan. Noong 2023, sumulpot yan. 2024, sumulpot yan.
Ito mga kakampi ni dating Pangulo.
Yes, laging sumusulpot yan. Lalo na nitong midterm election, parang mas maraming mga military ang bumoto laban sa administrasyon. No? So, sumusulpot yan. Pero iba kasi yung dynamic sa military. Will the military support a pro-China candidate, a pro-China political project? So iba yung dissatisfaction nila sa gobyerno, iba yung itatransfer ba nila yung support sa openly pro-China, like the Dutertes. No? So yun yung tingin ko mas magdo-dominate sa military. Kaya I doubt kung at this point merong serious threat. Ayun lang pag nagsalita yung Chief of Staff ng Armed Forces na walang ganito, walang that under my watch, napapaisip ka, like you.
May nagsabi din kasi sa akin.
What was that about?
May nagsabi din kasi sa akin na hindi raw sila satisfied.
Yeah.
And meron daw mga sundalo na ayaw mapunta sa gera.
Yes. Well, medyo hindi naman malapit yung ganung possibility. Dahil wala naman talaga tayong chances sa China. Pero ang usapin dito is more global. No? Yung mundo ang nakatingin dito. Dahil hindi lang to usapin ng West Philippine Sea. Usapin ito ng freedom of navigation sa isang waterway na mayroong 40 to 50% ng global trade ang dumadaan. So, at usapin ito ng international law. So, pag sinabi mo, yung Pilipinas ba makikipaggera sa China? Mukhang hindi naman yun ang sitwasyon. Mukhang ito ay usapin ng political at saka diplomatic engagement. Katulad ng civilian mission.
Oo, yung ating ito koalisyon na nasa West Philippine Sea ngayon. Oo, may nagtatanong kasi bakit, ano magagawa ng isang concert? Para sa ipinaglalaban natin sa West Philippine Sea. Isn't this also in a way provocative?
Well, tatlo ito. Yung unang civilian convoy was a Christmas convoy to resupply our troops sa BRP Sierra Madre sa Ayungin. Yung second civilian convoy ay yung sa Scarborough to resupply our fishermen. No? At itong ikatlo ay may element ng resupply doon sa mga mangingisda sa Pag-asa Island, pero ang dominant dito ay a regional peace concert kasama ang Indonesians, Malaysians, Koreans, Japanese, even Vietnamese. Medyo na-hospital lang yung performer. No? So yun yung kaibahan nito. At saka ito ay nasa gitna ng West Philippine Sea. Sabi nga ng mga organizers at performers, ito yung first peace concert sa gitna ng West Philippine Sea. Una sa Palawan at ikalawa sa Pag-asa, yung westernmost border ng ating EEZ. Kaya
so may Kalayaan Islands.
Medyo defining. Ang purpose niyan, to educate our population na hindi lang ito usapin ng Chinese military, Philippine military, usapin ito ng civilians. Kaya nga mismo yung China, inibitahan nila dito sa peace concert. So, may ganun yung impact niya sa mamamayan.
Medyo dumistansya daw ang Chinese Coast Guard ngayon at walang Chinese Navy presence. As compared to the first civilian mission, natakot kaya sila na multi-countries ang nandoon.
Siguro,
kapag may nangyari, maraming mapoprovoke.
Yes. At saka, pero nandun sila, nag-radio challenge sila, yung mga Coast Guard, shadowing sila all throughout. Nagulat nga sila Palawan pa lang may nagsha-shadow na. Nasa loob ka ng sovereign territory, sinashadow na sila. No? So, nagulat sila ron. Pero, hindi naman lumapit. At saka meron din tayong escort na Coast Guard. Pero, siguro, natututo na rin ng China na dami pido, dami pido.
Yes.
Paano mo haharangin ang isang peace concert? Bakit mo iwa-water cannon ang isang peace concert na regional yung representation? No? So, alam nila na vulnerable sila. Pero, binanatan nila ng gusto, social media. Na ito ay isang Philippine government, US government strategy para ipahiya kami. Medyo revealing dahil ba't nila ginamit yung salitang ipapahiya? No? Ibig sabihin, nararamdaman nila yung sakit ng political value nito. the biggest navy in the world, the biggest standing army in the world, medyo nasasaktan sa isang ragtag civilian convoy na kumakanta sa gitna ng West Philippine Sea. Diba? Yun yung panito David versus Goliath, political judo. Huwag mong tatapatan sila kung saan sila malakas. Tatapatan mo yung
do you think there
vulnerability
should be
nila.
more civilian missions?
Yes, ang tawag nila to civilianize the West Philippine Sea, no, to use people power rather than military power sa biggest military power in the world, no, kasama ng US. So, wag tayong pumasok sa dynamics ng US at saka China. I-define natin yung ating rights, yung ating sovereignty based on our own terms. Yun yung purpose
At
nito.
mukhang natatakot pumalag ang China sa mga ordinary
Siguro
civilians.
hindi nila alam paano papalag. Diba? Yun yung palito. Yun yung ganda. Yun yung beauty nito. No?
Mukhang pabalik na ang ating mga kababayan.
Alas 4.
Mula doon sa civilian convoy.
Yes,
Third
tsaka
Atenito
tsaka
mission.
sabi nila nag-e-enjoy, naglalaro yung mga Korean K-pop at saka yung mga Filipino bands, no? At saka yung mga naging ko sila magkakaibigan. Sana reflection 'yan sa ASEAN dahil kasabay niyan yung ASEAN Summit. No? Kasabay niyan. At yung ating flag anniversary. So maraming kasabayan.
Baka doon sa pang-apat na mission sasama ako ulit. Maraming salamat sa ating political pundit Ronald Llamas for his stories once again. Very
maraming
insightful.
salamat din at tumabot ako.
That wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. We hope we've given you the right start to your morning. It is the end of the week. We hope we helped you make the weekend matter. My name is Gretchen Ho, your One News, all sides, all the time.